Thank you, Rita, and good morning, everyone. Thank you to Green Alliance and to CBI for organising today's event and for the invitation to speak to you all. I've recently returned from the Philippines on a visit to see the recovery work that Christian Aid has been doing in response to the massive typhoon Haiyan, which struck there at the end of 2013. Over 6,000 people died, over 6 million people were forced from their homes, leaving lives and livelihoods ruined. 18 months on, I found high-quality, well-kept transitional housing in place and people beginning to earn a living again, no longer just relying on handouts. In Tacloban, one of the places hardest hit, I was welcomed by hundreds of genuinely smiling and grateful people. It took only the gentlest of questions for their smiles to evaporate, for the tales of bereavement and trauma to pour out. I learnt that every day people still talk about what happened that day the typhoon hit, their lucky escapes, the not-so-lucky ones they lost. In this coastal community, the typhoon had whipped up a huge body of water 6 meters high, which had swept in, wrecking homes and carrying people upwards and inland at the same time, claiming many victims on the way. One woman told me that for her, it had been a case of swimming along in this body of water, with her 4 children calling out, "Mum, Mum, how long do we have to keep on swimming?" And she said, "Just a bit longer, just a bit longer." And she said to me, "I didn't know how I would keep on swimming." And then very quietly, I still don't know how I kept on swimming. And then came the challenging question, so what are you doing about climate change? Because she knows, as I know, that climate change is making extreme weather events like Haiyan more and more likely, and that without urgent and radical action to cut carbon emissions, it will only ever be a matter of time until another massive typhoon strikes there. Everywhere I've travelled to see Christian Aid's work, I've seen the seriously damaging impacts of climate change on the lives of the world's poorest people. I've seen the impacts on water and food and land. I've seen the social impacts of migration, insecurity, malnutrition. But most importantly, I've also seen the poorest people willing to do what's necessary to overcome climate change, to adopt new farming techniques, diversify their crops, use new sources of energy, plant literally millions of trees, to work hard to mitigate the risk of disaster and to improve their capacity to respond if the worst happens. It's a struggle, but these people have in common a clear decision. They choose a better future for their children and their communities. This week, we get a chance to follow them. In just a few days' time, leaders of the world, including our Prime Minister, will be launching the new Sustainable Development Goals in New York. 15 years ago, the world agreed a set of goals for the new millennium. It was a moment of optimism, of hope, possibly even, dare I say it, naivety, but there was a conviction that a transformed future was just around the corner, well within our grasp. 15 years on, we have much to celebrate. Nearly 1 billion people lifted out of poverty, maternal mortality down 45% worldwide, infant mortality more than halved. Successive governments here in the UK, including the current government, deserve huge credit for the leadership role they've played in setting the development agenda and delivering their share of the requisite finance which lies behind these significant achievements. Yet we've also learned that the challenges are in some ways more complex, more interdependent and more political than we imagined in the year 2000. We've learned that even as many lifted themselves out of poverty, many were left behind, including too many women and girls, and the richest got richer still. We've learned that working together means not just governments or celebrities or international civil society organisations like Christian Aid, but businesses and investors and southern movements. And we've also come to understand that the climate we are changing threatens all the progress made, not just over the last 15 years, but over the last 50. We may also feel that we are in another, perhaps less innocent time. Fear is the dominant mood. Today, the future can often seem like something to be avoided, and we anchor in the now and the very near term, as if we hope by doing so to dodge the painful realities that the future seems to hold in store. We shore up the banking system for another few days here. We run up some fences and barbed wire over there, increasingly defended against the demands which as a human family we make of one another. The historian Professor Tim Snyder caught it when he said, "The future now clings to us, heavy with complications and crises, dense with dilemmas and disappointments." And in our highly materialistic society, we soothe our fears by living out what Christian Aid Chair Rowan Williams has called our fantasy of an endlessly adjustable world in which every physical boundary can be renegotiated. But the challenge of climate change makes us look at the Sustainable Development Goals and consider what kind of future we are going to choose. Are these goals just a restyling of the old ones, or do they express the needs of the moment? Will we seek to preserve our own dignity by shielding ourselves from the desperate demands of those to whom dignity is currently denied? Or will we seize the goals and the chance of an ambitious deal in Paris and rise to the unprecedented challenges of our world with courage and vision? No amount of scientific evidence or business investment can answer these questions for us. They are questions for the whole of humanity. I can't answer those questions for you, but I want to offer 3 reflections. Firstly, if we're going to face the future resiliently, we're going to have to do so together. Too many events like these feature someone like me giving the civil society view, someone else talking from a business perspective, and a government spokesperson as well. Yes, all 3 have valuable perspectives, but it's when we have real dialogue and move outside our own perspectives that real exciting change happens. We do have to embrace new and more imaginative and more integrated approaches that bring sectors together continuously in a shared endeavour. No more silos. As the Chief Executive of Christian Aid, not a day goes by when my organisation is not engaging with the private sector, academia, government departments, churches, other faith groups, think tanks and grassroots organisations, and we find common cause in unexpected places. To take just one example, right across the business and NGO communities, there has emerged a strong and shared desire for clarity on plans for the low-carbon economy. I'm not sure that the government has yet understood the significance of the strength of our united voice. Clear and stable policy frameworks enable investment, proper planning, shifts in business behaviour. Any long-term economic plan needs a corresponding environmental plan with strategies and milestones which everyone can interrogate and, in many cases, literally buy into. That wouldn't only facilitate bold business and investment decisions of the kind John spoke about, but also help civil society carry out its important task of holding other actors to account. So I make a plea to government to recognise that there's a genuine offer of partnership on climate policy making, bringing businesses and NGOs and government together in a more meaningful way. But we will need greater openness from our government than we have been seeing about the pathway it now intends us to travel to secure a low-carbon future. Because what's happening at the moment just doesn't seem to hang together, and without a vision, the people perish. Secondly, the thing that businesses and the poorest people in the world have in common is the desire that we do indeed have a future, so that short-term cost, whilst relevant, cannot in the end be prioritised over the long-term thinking, commitment and investment required for our survival. There may be some whose horizons of success are somewhat shorter, but short-termism has no serious place in climate politics. The Sustainable Development Goals are for the next 15 years. The Paris Climate Agreement doesn't even take effect until 2020 and may well include a long-term goal for 2050 or even the end of the century. So yes, it is easy to fix on the Paris climate deal itself, rather than the trust that underpins it and the action that flows from it. But climate change won't be solved by a deal in Paris, or in fact by any single decision. Paris must be a pivotal moment, a springboard to further ambition and deeper engagement. And yet it's what we all do in the light of Paris that will determine our future. We need to be in it for the long haul. And finally, we need to rise to meet the risks ahead with courage and with hope. Typhoon Haiyan was the worst typhoon in recorded history, and we're only at 0.8 degrees of warming. Our world is heading for the horrors of 3 degrees of warming, and the pledges being made ahead of the Paris summit are currently far short of what is necessary to keep us safe and with a chance of flourishing. The risks to our shared future are very real. The world's poorest people don't have insurance policies which kick in when disaster strikes. Their insurance is the conscience of you and me, of world leaders and governments, that we will commit to them and to each other to do whatever is necessary to cut emissions and contribute equitably to the costs of adaptation and mitigation. That we have to change is a hugely inconvenient truth. But for all of us, there is another truth, a more hopeful one. Bringing human dignity and the survival of our planet into the centre of all our thinking will bring new opportunities for all of us, governments, businesses, and civil society. It's the only kind of future worth contemplating. This week, we can expect to see rock stars and faith leaders and all the big political names hail the global goals and point towards the importance of the Paris deal. Let it be not just a big moment that comes and goes. Let it be the moment for a change of heart when we say, "We hear you, you matter, and you don't have to keep on swimming anymore."